I wanted to show our super duper new improved Highlights Foundation mission.
Oh, cool.
Positively impact children by amplifying the voices of storytellers who inform, educate, and inspire children to become their best selves. And
That's
that is what we're doing here.
We are.
Also, do please consider a donation to the Highlights Foundation if you're able to help us support the online programming that we've been providing. And please check out all of our workshops on our website. We've been adding online classes. We've been converting workshops from in-person to online events. And we're trying to figure out what might come next for our programming in July on forward. So stay tuned. So welcome everybody. Allison, good morning.
Good morning, George.
Welcome
Welcome this morning to the Highlights Foundation Gather. We are grateful to have Sarah Aronson and Linda Epstein with us today. This morning, we'll have time to listen to Linda and Sarah in conversation. Then you get to ask questions using the Q&A feature. Don't forget to separate your questions into the Q&A feature. If you've joined us each week, you know that Sarah Aronson writes everything from picture books to novels. She is a fabulous, fabulous writer, not only in the stories that she creates, but in the way that she embodies playful seriousness, the support of others, the celebrations, and the solitude. She does it all. Linda Epstein is an agent at the Emerald City Literary Agency and a poet and a writer. She represents everything from picture books to young adult novels. Some of her clients include Emmy Gerard, Nicole Valentine, Ruth Horowitz, Jess Rinker, Jenna Gavigan, Bill Koningsberg. Wow, I love these authors, and there are many more on her list. You can get a taste of Linda's interests on Twitter, where she is very chatty. She shares her love of music, of poetry, of Broadway shows, and lots and lots and lots of books. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
We'll take time now.
A little bit, Allison.
We'll take time now to enjoy Linda and Sarah in conversation, and then we'll get to just as many questions as we possibly can in that Q&A section. Remember to keep the chat going as you wish, but all of those great questions need to go into the Q&A session or Q&A section so that Sarah and Linda can see them. Thank you both again for being here. Let's get started.
Woo. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to HF Gather, where we are going to talk about the 3 C's: creativity, community, and curiosity. I'm so happy to be here every single week to talk to somebody else. I hope that, like me, you are finding these discussions inspiring and interesting, and that you're leaving this chat and going off and writing or drawing something amazing. As you know, every week I pick a word of the day. As you know, no one ever says my word, but we're going to try it again. Linda, could you close your eyes for a second?
Yes, because I'm a cheater.
How about it? Okay, here we go. Here is the word of the day. And for those of you who asked, that's the elephant from behind, the one thing that I can draw. All right, come on.
You got me? Hi.
All right, well, let's start. Let's start with the question that I've been asking everyone. How have you been keeping the creative flame going during this time where we're staying at home?
It's not easy. I have to say, I spend a lot of time at home anyway, because I work from home, even when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. And it's always hard for me to keep the creative flame afire, because working as an agent and being a writer, it's kind of sometimes hard to delineate like where one starts and the other ends and all of that kind of stuff. And oftentimes what I end up doing is focusing on my clients' work rather than my own. So it's always a struggle for me. And usually what I've been doing is kind of like being a weekend warrior, which is I usually write on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays during the regular time. It feels, I think a lot of people are experiencing like, what day is it? Is it a weekend? So I've kind of also been experiencing that. So I've been writing at different times, and I've been agenting over the weekend, which I really try hard not to do, but nevertheless, things are different now, so we have to adjust. So some of the things that I've been doing, in the beginning, I just succumbed to that I wasn't gonna write, honestly. I've been, at home for, I don't know, 6-7 weeks now. And at first I just kind of said to myself, I need to give myself the time and the space to not write, and that it's okay. And then I got sick. Couldn't get a test, but we know what that was. And then when I was better again, it kind of woke me up, and I said, oh my, I really need to do what I need to do to get this manuscript that I'm working on done. So 2 things that have been super helpful to me are, one is I have a friend named Sophia Pasternak, who's an amazing author. She wrote Anya and the Dragon, and she has a YouTube channel. She's probably going to be like, I can't believe you said this on the Highlights Foundation Gather. But watching her YouTube videos on writing, on outlining, she has this whole thing on schema, it really like busted something open for me. So that was one thing that I did. So I guess because I'm just like an advice giver, so what I would say to other people is either go watch Sophia's videos or go watch something. There are so many resources online to give you inspiration, to teach you how to outline if you don't know how to outline, to teach you how to not outline if you do outline. There are so many resources, so use your resources and consider that writing time. I consider that writing time. That's, yeah.
Last week, Chris Tevitz and I were talking about all the things that we now think of as writing time.
Mm-hmm.
Writing, drawing, thinking, reading, cooking, taking a walk if you're allowed to go outside.
Right.
That all those things are times where now, because some of us don't have the responsibilities that we had before, that we can focus on getting into that portal of creativity and getting back to our stories or our art,
Right.
which I think that transition is really the hard part, especially when you have two distinct jobs.
Yes. I wish my jobs were more distinct. My jobs aren't so distinct. You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of writing and revision and editing involved in my agent job and reading. So it's like, and we could have a whole 2-hour conversation about reading for pleasure versus reading for work. I mean, that's just like a whole other thing. But so that's one thing I did. Another thing that I did was I have a critique partner who's the most amazing person in the world. I mean, I think that she's legitimately the most amazing person in the world. Be that as it may, she and I speak every Friday morning. And since we started speaking every Friday morning, we've never missed a week. Sometimes we've had to, move the day, whatever, but we speak every week. And one of the things that we do is we kind of process our week in terms of our writing. What did we do? What didn't we do? We share good news. We whine and complain. We do all of the things. We talk about, our characters, our plot. So we talk like nuts and bolts writing. At the end of our call every week, we say what we're going to do for the following week. So I have someone out there who's holding me accountable. What were you going to say?
I have a group like that too. And one of the things that we start with discussing what happened during the week. Then we set goals for that day. We meet every Saturday and we spend 3 hours writing, and then we all get back together and talk about what we did, celebrate that, and also make a list of affirmations that help us. So like right now I'm drafting. So my affirmation continues to be think less, write more.
Oh, nice.
Which is
I should just do that in my whole life.
that I'm trying to have a balance of reading, revising, and drafting. When I'm drafting, I need to think less, don't worry about things. But the affirmations that have come from that group have also helped me during each week to establish some intention, whether it is for drafting or whether I intend to take a week off, which everyone is fair game.
Absolutely.
If you need a week off, if you need to just watch television, we all have to be so much easier on ourselves.
I think in general, not just during a pandemic, I think we should be easier on ourselves, quite frankly.
And when I think about the age-old question of balance, life-work balance, work-work balance, that I think that the obstacle I feel like that's this elusive thing. And at the same time, I think, what's been missing? Me being kind to myself. Is that I was always trying to add more, like to make both sides heavier instead of making both sides lighter so that I could balance them.
Oh, nice. I love that. I love that idea of making both sides lighter. The other thing about balance, though, is, you're kind of like going like this, right? And I find for me, it's not always even.
Right.
It doesn't have to be evenly balanced. It just needs to be balanced in a way that works. So for me, for example, because, I'm not someone who writes every day. I never have been. I can almost promise that I never will be. It's just not in my nature to do most things every day, except like brush my teeth, clean myself, like that kind of stuff. But I think that sometimes for me, I need to just only be writing and not be making food for my family or myself, which is one of the reasons why I love going to highlights, because then I can just literally just write and I don't have to do a thing besides concentrate on my writing. And then sometimes, as I said, like at the beginning of the lockdown for me, the balance for me was saying I'm not writing. But for me also, I may not have been writing, but I was still speaking to my critique partner every week. So, which reminded me that I am a writer, and we talked about things having to do with writing. We talked about reading. We talked about the character. I made promises for what I was going to do for the next week, and I didn't do them. And it was okay because, the next week when we spoke again, I kind of said, well, this is what I wanted to do. Yeah, I didn't do any of those things, but I was on a walk and I was thinking, blah, 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 blah. So it's just, the answer to your question was how to keep the creativity alive has to do with what you said about being kind to ourselves. I think being flexible, having someone to talk to about your work. I think it's so important. I know that there are a lot of people, I'm an introvert, I'm a lone wolf, believe it or not, and I know a lot of people won't believe this, but I am a total introvert. I'm an introvert, but I also really like to talk to people. And I find that talking to people keeps the creativity. It's kept my project alive for me. Otherwise, it would be too easy to just put it aside. So
I think for me in my process, I am an extrovert, just in case anyone did not notice that. One of the things that is most important for me in my process is brainstorming. And that when talking out loud, for some people, is the kiss of death. The minute they say their ideas out loud, they feel stymied by them. For me, I need to constantly be talking through ideas with either my critique partners or sometimes these days my husband.
I know non-book people.
Who has
Non-book
never
people are amazing. I have a whole life that's not book people, with friends who, some of them are readers and some of them are not. And talking to those people, you get such different input than you get from like us jaded writers, right?
Right.
It's
And that has, and I've also realized, I mean, I think I've said this every week, that I think I may have forgotten how important journaling in the morning and maybe a sense of boredom is to my process. That when I'm quiet and still, that ideas come. When I'm busy, I'm thinking about other things. And I think that the vantage point we both share of being professional readers, critiquers, as well as writers, that balance needs some space in between it to transition.
Hey, I just wanted to yeah, agree. I wanted to just say something also. Thank you very much for having me today, because I know you've been speaking to writers, and I believe that the other writers that you're speaking to are all published writers. I, like most of the people, or many of the people who are probably watching this interview or chat or whatever it is we're doing, aren't published. So I really appreciate that. It feels like a huge acknowledgement to me that I'm a writer. And you know, Sarah, you and I have talked about imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of other people will also really share that syndrome. But here's the thing, and this is something that I've been saying since I became an agent, and actually before I became an agent even, which is like a dozen years ago, is that if you write, you're a writer. You're not an aspiring writer. You're not a writer wannabe. You're just a writer. So I really appreciate being spoken to as a writer, even though I'm not a published writer yet.
All right, so I want to reinforce this, people. If you have a notebook with you, I want you to write down, I am a writer, right? I am a writer. I don't want to hear like that recognition, which is empowering. It is sometimes intimidating, but it is something that you have to accept. We rely on crutches, which you know, sort of encourage fear. And right now, we don't need any more fear and instability. So accept it. If you sit down even once a week or once a month, or you're thinking about writing, you are a writer. You sit down, you create stories, that makes you a writer. And I don't think, and obviously not just in my book, getting published is something that takes work, some luck, a lot of luck.
And a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
But there's no sort of leap that says from that point, like you become a writer. You are a writer.
Right. And you can aspire to be published, but you don't aspire to be a writer. You're just a writer. Actually, it's kind of funny because when Allison introduced me, she started with poet, and I was like, if you go back and look at my reaction, I was like,
I know.
I always thought of myself as a poet until I started writing fiction. And now I just think of myself as a writer, and I really predominantly write fiction, but I guess I'm a poet too. So I'm going to have to put that one in my repertoire of what I call myself. So
yeah, and I'm sure if Dear Abby was still around, she would have a nice answer for what you say when your non-writer friends ask questions that challenge that idea that being published means being a writer. I'm sure she would. And in lieu of her answer, I would just say, I'm working on stuff. And I'm in, you know, like that don't buy into that fear, that honor your process and honor the stories that are in your heart, and be kind to yourself by acknowledging that you are a writer or an artist. That is, I think that's a really important part of the process that, especially among women, that we tend to apologize for. And I have already declared this quarantine no guilt quarantine, no sorries quarantine. We're not going to say, we're not apologizing for anything anymore.
Yeah.
Unless
We do something bad. Yeah. Which happens.
Then, as my mother would say, and father in the New York speak, then you have to apologize.
Exactly.
So I would like, last week, Chris and I talked a lot about inspiration and drafting and getting into that creative sort of mystical zone. And because you have this dual vantage point of agent and writer, I would like to talk a little bit more about revision and feedback. So first, I know you must have lots of things that you say to lots of clients or lots of would-be clients. Is there general advice that everybody seems to need?
Regarding
Getting the book ready for the next step, regarding preparing for revision.
So I think one thing is to let it rest. So when you finish something, I think letting it rest a while, maybe even like a week or more. Some people will be like, a week! And some people are like, a week? You know what I mean? But I think letting it rest is really important, because then you can come back with kind of fresh eyes, you know? So that's one thing. In terms of like the transition from like writing to revising, I think that's one thing. I think another thing is reading whatever you're writing out loud, whether that's a picture book or a novel, or you know, anything really. You should read it out loud, because I feel like you're going to hear things. I know when I read things out loud, whether it's my work or someone else's, I can hear when something's not working, because you kind of stumble on it. You stumble on the sentence, or you get to the end of the sentence, you're kind of like, wait, what did I just say? What did that mean? So reading things out loud, I think, is really, really important in the revision process. And I think also having someone else read your work, certainly before you send it to your agent or query it, have someone else read your work. It's really, really important. So for people who are agented, for all intents and purposes, your agent is not your first reader. Shouldn't be your first reader, unless you have some arrangement with your agent that is the case. Or, you know, in some situations, I've told my clients, sure, I'll look at it rough. You know, sometimes with picture books, it's just like to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Like, I think this idea is great, run with it. But I don't give them feedback on it necessarily. It's just like a thumbs up, thumbs down. So
I think sending rough things to any professional has never worked for me. I can say every time I've been sure that rough thing was so strong and ready, I have never been successful in taking it to the next step. So I concur with that advice. Also, you know, recently in my class, in my Get to Know Your Novel class, I gave everyone the Don Moss exercise of pull a random page out of your manuscript and read it cold. And that really opens my eyes every time I give myself the time to do it, because always in the reading process, especially when you don't wait, I tend to skip over chapters because I think they're good. And getting
and then you go back and read it and say, oh, that was 70% good.
Right. Actually, I'm skipping them because they're terrible. But it is it's important to be honest with yourself, and that space that you're talking about and having a trusted reader allows me to be generous but also honest with what the words are on the page, the difference between the words on the page and what I intended to say, which are sometimes very far apart in the beginning, and then with revision it gets closer and closer. And I think that has just I've begun to notice that a lot in my writing.
Yeah.
And let's think about how, I have talked about how I think about feedback as a giver of feedback. How do you hope that what do you have any hopes when you're sending the fears, when you're sending feedback?
Oh my gosh, yes. I have so many fears. One fear I have is that my client is going to hate me and fire me. So she doesn't know anything, or how could she say that? Forget it. I'm going to fire her. So there's that. But here's another thing, and I'm fairly blunt in my everything, but in my feedback. It's something that I think that people who work with me are looking for, is someone who's a real straight shooter. So I don't ever want to not be a straight shooter. But what I've learned, and I learned this, I was starting to learn it before, but then when I went and got my MFA, and you don't need an MFA to be a writer, but I did go and get one for reasons. And I was being critiqued, all the time myself, and was on the other end of it, that I really saw how what I was saying, that the way that I'm saying what I need to say, can be kinder and gentler. So you can be a straight shooter and still be kind and gentle. And it's, for me, a lot of the things that I learn as an agent and or as a writer are life lessons. Like, in general, I don't ever want to not be a straight shooter, and I am always working on being kinder and gentler in my presentation. So I guess what I am hoping that my clients, but also, other people that I give critiques to, whether it's like a revise and resubmit to someone who's queried me, or, at a conference when I'm doing critiques, what I hope people are getting is that I'm really trying to help them make their work better. That it's about the work, it's not about them personally, and that whatever I'm saying because I want them to take their work and their writing to the next level.
Yeah.
And sometimes I know that when I get critique, a lot of times I'm just like so grateful. I'm mostly just so grateful, because it's hard as an agent to find, people to give you critique where it's not like weird. So like, I don't take critiques from my clients who are amazing writers. It's like, I wish that they could be my critique partners, but I don't do that. So I try to take revision notes and critique as a contribution to me and to my work. And ultimately, it's about the work. It's about making the work better. And also, I'm sorry, I'm going to say one more thing. Also, just because a critique partner or an agent or an editor or whoever says this isn't working, have you thought about doing that, doesn't mean you have to, right? That sometimes there are things that you just don't, it doesn't go with what your vision is, and that's okay. So, yeah. How about you?
Yeah, one of the responsibilities of being a writer as you are learning and growing is to learn what works for you, so that you can ask for it. That what's really important to me is to know what I'm doing well before I get into what I'm not, what still is missing. And so, but in the beginning, I didn't know how to ask for that. I didn't understand what was holding me back, when all I got was, this is what you need to fix.
And I had a client who told me that. She said, she might even be on this. Natasha, are you out there? She said to me, because I was being brutal in my critique from her. She said, yes, hi. I was being brutal. I don't think that the things that I was saying were wrong, but this was a few years ago, but I could have been kinder and gentler. And I didn't lead with all the things that I loved about the project. And in my naivete, why I didn't is because I thought to myself, well, she knows that I love it. Why would I be giving her critique? Why would she be my client if I didn't absolutely adore her work? But you know what? As now being on the other side of it as a writer with my own agent, I need to hear like what's working. It's so important. So yeah.
One is, especially in terms of developing a manuscript, to know what's working and to know what is sparking the curiosity of the reader can allow you to do more of that.
Right.
Right. Right. So, and that space that you talked about between writing something and getting a reader for it is also the space you should take after getting feedback. I'm in week 4 of space between feedback on my work in progress, middle grade, and actually doing anything.
Yeah.
And the reason is because my first reaction would have been perhaps to delete everything and start again, because I was feeling quite overwhelmed. And I think, people accepting that feedback can be overwhelming has also been something that I've only recently been willing to admit. It can be really overwhelming.
Yeah.
So instead of deleting everything, which I have done, or changing everything, or responding in a way that was not patient, so hard to be patient, or thought out, I just let it sit and I started drafting something else. And now finally, 4 weeks later, I know where my beginning is, and I know what my agent, thank you, Sarah, is asking of me, which I did not understand in the beginning, and I didn't need to talk to her about it. What I needed was some space between my baby and the work.
Right. I recently sent a picture book manuscript to my agent, and she came back with revision notes. And my agent is Rena Rossner of the Deborah Harris Agency. She's probably not there because she's at home with 5 kids.
Oh my God.
I know, she's an angel and a saint. But she kind of gave me some feedback on some things, and we work in track changes, and I think that it's like really helpful if she's saying, maybe she's like putting a word in or taking a word out or adding some punctuation or changing the sentence so that it makes a little more sense. I just accept that change. It's like, for me, I am not so attached to exactly how, and I don't write in rhyme or anything like that. So, I'm not so attached to it. If she thinks it works better this way rather than that way, if it's going to make it more sellable, I don't need to be attached to, I said it this way. I just want it to be the best it can be, because honestly, I just want to sell the book, right? Now, obviously, there are other things that she suggested to me, that she took out, and I kind of like clicked the whichever thing in track changes that like puts it back in. And then I wrote a comment and said, why I was keeping it back in, and she was fine with it, But so I think stuff like that, like hold on to the things that are important, but be willing to give up the things that aren't important, because isn't the point to, if you're working with an agent, right? Or for me, the point is to like try and get the book sold, right? So.
Well, I think the only thing that I need to hold on to as when I get feedback from my agent, what I remind myself is, why did I want to write this book, and what is important for me to say, and what is important about this book, and what does it say from me?
Yeah.
And if I need to keep that in the forefront of my brain swirling, so to speak, because she's reading the words on the page and giving me feedback. I am trying to say something that will ultimately have my name on the cover. Right. And I don't want to lose that. When I lose that, my writing takes a nosedive.
100% agree.
Saying that, then some of the feedback feels right. Some of the feedback feels like I need to just ask why. And a great agent understands that it's as we've said before, feedback is not a to-do list. It
No.
partially is a to-do list, but it's not a check it off to-do list toward publication.
Right.
It is a series of questions that open a door for you.
Right. And that's why I love working in track changes, because it ends up being a dialogue. So, so Rena had like taken out like this whole little kind of section, and I put it back in, and I told her why. I was like, well, that's actually the heart of the book for me, so I want to keep that in. But then what I realized is if she's taking that out, then at the end, I kind of like came back to that, because that, it kind of like cemented what for me was the heart of the book. And she's like, of course, okay with it. I mean, the whole point is, you know, to get my work out there. So,
Okay. Before we go to the lightning round, are there specific tips that we have not addressed yet that you can offer to writers and illustrators who are not yet agented?
like query tips or
Whatever you think what are the things that you're seeing in your inbox that you would like that you have opinions about?
what don't I have opinions about? I mean, that's like such a huge question. I mean, my advice to everyone is keep writing. So if you finish something and you've sent it out to agents, write the next thing. If you are getting a lot of rejections, write the next thing. That's like the biggest thing, is just write the next thing, just like keep going. I guess that's it, really, keep going. That's the hugest thing. And then as far as like what comes into my inbox is, and I swear I've been saying this since before I was an agent, and that's really do your research when you're querying, because I really get things in my inbox that I would just never read. I don't like horror or like, you know, political thrillers and, you know, like stuff like that. I just don't. I don't have an opinion that it's not bad, it's not wrong. I know tons of people love to read that and write that, but I don't read that, so I don't rep it because I don't read it. So don't send it to me. And if people do like just even a little bit of research, but kind of get a sense of, you know, who I am. I mean, I'm really easy to research because I'm very vocal on Twitter. I used to have a blog, which is still up there. So like you can kind of get my voice, which is really representative of the kinds of things that I like to read.
And is there, when you do have an MFA, as do I, and both of us agree, you don't need to have an MFA, but you do need to study. And are there books or you mentioned podcasts, are there to study, to learn more about writing? Any favorites? I'm going to share one of my favorites.
Oh, Kendra's book. Yeah.
I love this book. This has been a great book for me for a pandemic. That
interesting.
It's not prescriptive, but it's focused on getting me to feel creative.
I think I have that. I can't remember. I have probably about 5 other bookcases besides this pretty one behind me. And I have a whole huge section with just all books on writing. Obviously something like that, or just for inspiration, you know, Bird by Bird, of course, by Anne Lamott, or Stephen King on writing. I think those books are both so inspirational. I could reread either of them multiple times. And interestingly, it's the only Stephen King book I've ever read.
Same here, same.
But you know what? I totally admire him as a writer, which is why I love that book. So that for inspiration, I would say those. I think for like kind of like nuts and bolts stuff, Cheryl Klein's books are good. I had the one that she had originally published. And then I had the other one, the name I don't remember. Sorry, Cheryl, but it's got a
It's
great
Second Sight and then Magic Words.
Magic
I
Words.
love Magic Words.
Yeah.
I
And-
love that book.
And then the two books that I've been using since I've been writing novels myself are Story Genius, and I always want to just call it Kill the Cat, but it's Save the Cat. I'm not a cat person, sorry, book people. So those two books I find really inspirational. And I don't really do podcasts much because I have trouble focusing on that. I'm just listening to stuff. So the only one that I listen to is the Literati Cast, which
great.
is Jen Loughran's,
Yeah.
and she's amazing, and her podcast is amazing. And then, as I said earlier, Sophia Pasternak's YouTube videos, amazing. Those really, those have been my pandemic things that have inspired me the most.
I think that the balance of finding inspiration for creativity, but also often just going in and studying the craft is the way that I keep myself in the game, even when I feel distracted.
And read, right?
Always read, always read.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to the lightning round.
Uh-oh.
All right, pencil, pen, or straight to keyboard?
Straight to keyboard.
Scrivener or note cards?
Scrivener.
Note cards. I'm going to be the last human being in the
It's
planet.
fine. Whatever works, right?
Up early in the morning or late into the night?
Both.
Ah, latkes or Hamantaschen?
That's not fair because one's sweet, one's savory. Both. Is that going to be the only Jewish thing that you and I discussed?
I know. We have not done anything Jewish. It's not good. Hiking or biking?
Hiking. I mean, like hiking, if there's a path.
What's the part of your job that you always leave for last?
I don't know. Maybe queries. Sorry, guys.
And what frivolous thing do you miss the most?
I mean, one of the things that I miss the most, to me, doesn't feel frivolous, but I know that I have it because I'm very privileged, and that is I have an angel who comes to my house once a week to clean and do laundry. And that, honestly, I miss the most because being stuck in the house and being bad at keeping the house clean and up, and there's a lot of us here. It feels like a lot of us. There's actually 3 of us. There was 4 of us, now there's 3 of us. So it's frivolous in that it's totally something that most people don't have, and yet for me it really leaves me with a space in which I can just feel free to create and not worry that there are ants on the counter or the toilet bowl is dirty. So that.
Everyone on the chat is talking about what they're missing and
Yeah.
Hugging my friends. Yes.
So I mean, I now I feel like a monster because I've had a number of people in my life who've lost people, whether to COVID or just because, and not being able to be there for them, and especially for Jewish people where, we would, sit Shiva and I would have jumped in and, helped with that. That has been kind of awful, to not be able to be with people for that.
Well, the disruption of our rituals is really disconcerting, and in so many ways. I mean, I actually just finished writing a Shiva scene for my adult manuscript. I know, and I know.
The funny thing is, though, that one of the rituals for Jewish people is lighting candles on Friday night, Shabbat candles, and that's something that I've started to do, because that's not something that was really in my repertoire. It's like, yeah, you know, on a holiday, if on a Friday for some reason, but now it's kind of like, I can light candles on Friday night and it actually does something for me. It's also when I personally, I mean, I'm doing it multiple times during the week, but I specifically, when I light those candles, also say there's a prayer for healing that I say every Friday night for specific people as well as for everyone that I don't know in the world. So
yeah, I also find that where some of those rituals and spiritual rituals, which when I was busy, we didn't do, and now there are opportunities for eye contact, for checking in, for just taking a moment before we, you know, before we focus on other things,
right.
that I see where the roots of these rituals became so important in a world before there was all the ways of being in contact.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's take some questions.
I hope they're not hard questions.
Will Linda be logging on to DV Pit after HF gathers today?
Oh, you guys, I actually I'm very supportive of DV Pit. I did some query critiques for people who are participating in it, and I might scan through it, but I'm actually not open to queries right now because I have over 200 queries in my inbox that I haven't gotten to. So the answer to that is maybe. I also, I find Twitter pitch events, including DV Pit, but not exclusively DV Pit, very overwhelming. So maybe.
Good.
Yeah.
So Sarah Tobias writes, a novel that I wrote years ago keeps popping back into my head. It feels like it's time to take it to the next level. She's not sure what to do next. It's a first draft with loads of issues, but good bones. Any advice on best next steps would be appreciated. Between what to read about writing novels, she has shared her first pages, but she is not sure about the craft of writing a longer book, as she's been writing picture books for so long.
So I would guess I would have her do a full read through, and then maybe do one of those like Scrivener side-by-side things and kind of like try to like write it again, because I know that when I've looked at things that I wrote years ago, there might be some good bones, but I'm such a better writer now than I was. So kind of like rewriting it, I get to flex those muscles, whereas just revising it, you might like keep some stuff that you can do better now. That would be my suggestion.
I'm going to take Linda's advice one step further. When I wrote the first draft of Beyond Lucky in 2003 or 4.
See, you're the expert on this stuff, Sarah, not me. Yeah.
And then 5 years later, I met somebody who had actually read it. She'd been a second reader at a publisher, and I had no idea the publisher had sent me a form letter response. And that's when you could send directly to that. It was at a time where you could send directly to editors. And so it got me excited when I met this woman, how much she remembered about my book after 5 years. So I went back, just what you're talking about, and I read through that old manuscript that I had not looked at, really put it back in a drawer, even though I loved it, for 5 years. And what I found was it was not very good. But what I also found were that there were a couple of things that I loved. So I wrote down the things that agent remembered, and I wrote down the things that I loved that I remembered from the manuscript that I loved about it. And then I rewrote it blind.
Rewrote it. Yeah.
I rewrote it blind.
Oh,
and
nice.
rewriting, like remembering what's important in your book is in here.
Mhm.
Sometimes the words you have written present obstacles
Right.
to the future of your book. Right now, one of the things I'm going to do with my middle grade manuscript is chop off about 7 chapters, because my beginning is, it's clear to me now that my beginning is in the wrong place. And
There's
the only
such
way
a
I'm gonna
common
get it
thing,
there-
right? Isn't that such a common thing? Like,
Yeah.
like the beginning is the middle is actually the beginning. Yeah, all there.
And the only way I can get it there is to just write it again, is to
Yeah.
get away from what I've written
Yeah.
and start writing again. It's still there. You don't have to be like me and eliminate it, but it is, that is, writing it over is the best thing you could do.
Yeah.
Ruth wants to see your mug, your cool giraffe mug. My mug is from the Society of Illustrators.
I believe, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I believe that Tracy Banger gave this to me. If I got the wrong client, I'm sorry, but it's great because it's big.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. A big mug is great. We have a couple of questions about finding an agent when you're new. And I think we sort of have answered some of the questions. Do your research.
Yep.
Get your work read. Make
Right.
sure it is as great as it can possibly be.
Mhm.
Anything else?
I mean, there's a lot else. I've actually been in conversation with Allison about doing a highlights program, an online program of, I finished my novel, now what? So hopefully we will do that, and then you could just take that and know. But I think mostly do your research. If you don't know how to do your research, ask someone, like find out how to do the research. And mostly that's just like online stuff. That's, following people on social media. That's looking on websites. That's looking in the backs of books and seeing like who represented, whatever book it is. I'm sorry, I'm trying to quit my messenger because someone's texting me, and I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can
You
hear
can hear the ding.
Sorry. I just tried to quit it, so hopefully.
It's okay.
So yeah, and so I think it didn't work. I'm so sorry, guys. So do your research. Learn how to write a query letter. It's not an art. It's a science. There's specific ways to write the query letter. So oh my gosh.
And there are lots of examples of great query letters out there.
Yeah.
So, and this is, and lots of classes on writing query letters if you do not know what a query letter should look like.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting question. How do you gingerly tell a critique partner who is rough on the group as a whole that they are too harsh without ruining the group dynamic? And I think that collaboration dynamic is what agents have to be really great at.
So the question is about if there's someone in the group who's being too harsh.
Yeah, or who is, yeah, and I'm going to add on to that question, who is not helping you feel safe in your process. How do you help guide the people in your critique group so that they're giving you what you need to take the next step?
I mean, honestly, my input regarding that is the same as like if a friend asked me that for like life. So I think that all relationships, the basis of all relationships is communication. So really you need to just communicate to that person by modeling what you want. So in a kind and gentle way, because you want them to be kinder and gentler, which is kind of where we started our conversation, right? That, this was really hard for me to hear. I needed to hear something positive before all the negatives, or, it was hard for me to take this criticism because it felt, demeaning, or, whatever it is that's not working for you, or even something like, the kind of critique that I'm looking for is this. I need someone who can give me helpful suggestions about how to have more of a middle grade voice, rather than you stink and this isn't helpful and shut up. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
When
So
I'm having trouble, when I have had trouble in my critique group, I've always tried, and I may have, and learned from experience that I put the problem on me. I've been having trouble receiving feedback. I also think that rules for critique groups are great, and you need to stick with them. And when you take a break from those rules, everyone needs to understand why, because trust is really important.
it is.
How you present yourself in your critique group makes a difference too. That if you come in and say, "Oh, I think this book is awful. Tell me what's wrong with it." Guess what you're going to get?
Lots of
Right.
feedback.
Lots of reinforcement.
Right, and lots of reasons why it's awful.
So as the writer and ask your critique group questions to help them give you the feedback that will help you take the next step. Do not belittle your own emotional reactions.
Right.
We all and take that break. If there was one thing that we can emphasize over and over this week, take that break after you receive that
Feedback.
that feedback.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not helping yourself.
Right.
And part of the feedback, part of the relationship of giving and getting feedback is giving it and is also getting it in the honest, trustful way it was meant to be given. Is there anything in particular you're looking for in your inbox?
I'm close to queries. So I'm looking for my inbox to be becoming less, which will mean that I've been answering queries. The only two things that I am still open to, and people can email me directly only for these two things, is that I've been looking for a queer feminist retelling of the Esther story.
Stop asking for that.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing is a YA that would reclaim Lilith as a feminist icon.
I love that.
So those are two things that I really want. I mean, the other thing that I really want is a middle grade or a YA that's set in the Shanghai ghetto during World War II. I don't want any other World War II books. So those three things, which all happen to be Jewish things, and I'm looking for that from Jewish people. So that would be like a #Own Voices project that I would be looking for. Other than that, I'm close to queries, and I'm hoping to reopen to queries in the summer.
Can you just say very quickly a little bit about the Jewish Symposium? A couple of people are saying hi. And a little bit about what the symposium is about and what you're looking for looking forward to the symposium doing in the future.
Okay, so I might cry when I talk about this because the symposium, I'm literally gonna cry, was supposed to be this weekend. So I would have been going up on Friday, and it sold out really, really quickly. So what the Jewish Symposium is, I started it last year at Highlights. It was very successful, I believe. That's what people tell me. And what my intention with it is to change the conversation in publishing about stories with Jewish characters and Jewish themes. So the symposium is like a group of conversations that we have over a number of days. The basic like format of it is that I get amazing speakers who are mostly authors, but then also author agent, author editor, who give keynote addresses, and then we break up into some groups, and we do these roundtable discussions about questions that I come up with. There's usually an opportunity for people to read from their work, not critique, just read, which is an amazing experience, I think. And last year, what was great about it was that the people who were in attendance, the faculty as well as the attendees, really came out of it, I believe, like a little changed, because we dug into some really deep issues. Things about marginalization. Are Jewish authors marginalized? Are Jewish stories marginalized? Which is two distinct things. We dug into issues such as, you know, whether we should still be writing about the Holocaust or not. Yes, we should. I guess I'm really missing it. Also, the most amazing thing about it, I think, was there are places that I can go where I know it's all Jewish people. And there are places that I can go where I know it's all writers. But there are not a lot of places that I can go where it's all Jewish writers. And it was amazing. Yeah. That was amazing. And so I was so looking forward to that. The 2020 symposium, we're digging really, really deeply into diversity, and which is something that I feel very strongly about, trying to open up the conversation about, like, who's a Jewish person, what do Jewish people look like, you know, different kinds of Jewish people, whether you're Orthodox or whether you're Sephardic, or, you know, whether you're you know, a person of color. Like, all of those things are in our community, and a lot of those things aren't represented in our community in books. So that's like a small taste. I could literally go on for days. That's why we had a symposium.
You know, one of the amazing things about the Own Voices movement has been the permission slip to say, as a Jewish writer, that writing from a Jewish point of view is my own voice,
Yeah.
and to feel that recognition.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not just a writer, I'm a Jewish writer. And that feels really good.
Yeah.
Also, Linda, I want to thank you for creating the symposium for us and for what that's done, but it also has been in context of our broader conversation around essential conversations, and it's helped us create that model that we've used. So we have a symposium for Latinx authors happening in the fall. We have a Black Women Writers Retreat. It's part of our diversity fellowship. All these different pieces where we've been able to use that model that you developed with Allison to help us expand out our entire essential conversations.
Oh, well,
thank you for being such an important part of that as we develop our programming around it.
Well, George, I mean, I literally can't thank you and Highlights enough, because I really found my writing community at Highlights. My critique partner, I found at Highlights. Some of my best writer friends, I found at Highlights. I get to teach at Highlights, which is amazing. And of course, you know, just going there when we can, going there, being there is just such food for my soul and food. So
the food, I feel the same way. I feel
Yeah.
like, and I have like sort of a Pavlovian response to even seeing a picture now of the barn and the cabins and Molly and some food. Like, my Facebook memories keep popping up
yeah,
with pictures of beautiful dishes. And I think, oh, like that's my prompt to get back into that creative place, because it's like on the highlight sign, it's like a big permission slip to say, you can be creative here. Everything that's going to happen here is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Move you forward.
I have never written as many words anywhere as I have at highlights.
Right.
Well,
So before
I
we
sent it to
go,
Ian
can you recommend
yesterday.
one book? Can we recommend one book to read before I forget? Because I really want to recommend, because we have because we're talking about the symposium, The Assignment by Liza Weimer. She's a Milwaukee writer, and if you're interested in Jewish books, I'm not going to spoil it. Take a look at this one when it comes out.
I can recommend 3 books. Sorry, but that's just what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go back here and I'm going to take them off my bookcase to show you.
Sorry, George.
The first is Dozens of Donuts by Carrie Finneson. You can pre-order it. It's coming out this summer. It is amazing. It's a picture book. The second is The Show Must Go On, which is the follow-up to Lulu the Broadway Mouse. It is out now. It is, it's wonderful. It's about Broadway. It's about dreams. It's so good, by Jenna Gavigan. It's out now. You can buy that. And then there's The Dare Sisters, which is coming out this fall. I believe it's September 8th. And this comes out, you can pre-order this. And just to be super helpful, because that's how I am, you can order at bookshop.org. You can order at IndieBound, which kind of leads to Bookshop, and you can order at barnesandnoble.com. Pre-order, and pre-orders are really, really important. So yes. How was that?
Awesome. Thank you. Linda, I was just going to tell you, I spoke with Dan, our hospitality manager, yesterday. He's working on what our plans will be when we reopen. So we'll have a cabin ready for you. I can't wait for you to come visit us. Hopefully by June, we can make that happen for real.
Whoa.
So thank you all. It's been great.
Thank you so much. It was
Thank you,
wonderful.
everyone. Have a great week writing, and we'll see you
Yeah.
next week.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.